Hi there, Smart Driver. Talking to you today about road signs to pass a driver's test and for the purposes of defensive driving. But mostly we're talking about traffic signs in your bid to pass your driver's test and be fully prepared for what's going to happen on test day. Again, I got some jiu-jitsu face going on here. I called out the biggest guy, the second biggest guy in the club, and of course he's a black belt as well, so I kind of got what I deserved yesterday in jiu-jitsu. So that's what's going on with my face. Nothing crazy or creepy. Road signs. We're talking about road signs, what laws you have to follow for the purposes of your driver's test and being a safer, smarter driver, because getting the information about the road that you are on allows you to be more predictable on the roadway and to predict traffic patterns, interpret traffic patterns, and understand the actions of individual road users on the roadway. And years ago, before I became a driving instructor, a good driving instructor, a better driving instructor, the aspect of actually being able to teach people, I had a new driver that was fresh out of truck driving school, and we were driving the truck. And of course, this was before GPS or any other, Google Maps and those types of things. And we were coming out of where we got loaded. I think we were hauling a load of lumber. And I said to him, what's the last sign that was on the roadway? And of course he couldn't tell me. And it was a little bit like police. You have to know where you are on the roadway at all times so you can call for backup services and they can locate where you are. It's the same thing with traffic signs. Traffic signs are so important to commercial drivers and people driving larger vehicles, and they're significant to people driving personal vehicles as well. So know that, read your traffic signs. Don't just be following other traffic when you're driving on the roadways to keep yourself safe, and especially when you're when you're working towards passing a driver's test. Find the links for these down in the description. Why get a dash cam? Dash cams are awesome. There are people, however, are convinced that it is going to protect them. Remember, dash cams are not only watching other people and other traffic on the roadways, but they are also watching you. And in terms of my expert witness testimony work that I do, I look at a lot of dash cam footage, particularly related to transit buses, and oftentimes it's the video that provides evidence against the person that it's supposed to be protecting. So know that in terms of a dash cam, that it could work against you instead of working for you. Mastering shoulder checks. Marion's going for a driver's test here on Friday. Good luck on that, Marion. And shoulder check, shoulder check, shoulder check. The shape of the sign, the colors, and the words or symbols thereon allow you to glean the information from the sign quickly. Road sign classifications, regulatory signs. So here in Canada, regulatory signs would include such things as speed signs, turns prohibited, slower traffic, stay right. Those are all regulatory signs. Cautionary signs, and then lane control signs, object marker signs, as I talked about in the introduction in terms of lane hazard obstruction signs. Hazard obstruction signs will warn you of any fixed objects along the roadway that you could potentially hit. Object marker signs, as I said, they have hash marks on them, and the way to know which side to pass on a hazard obstruction sign is to think of a kettle of water being poured on the sign. The side that the water pours off on the sign is the side of which you pass either left, right, or left or right. So these are important for larger vehicles. They're also important if you're pulling a trailer on the roadway. Object marker signs, now that I've mentioned them to you, you will see them everywhere on the roadway because they are the most prolific signs along our roads. Regulatory signs, stop signs, speed signs, railway crossing signs in the United States are regulatory signs, and of course for big trucks, brake check signs, the places where you have to pull in and check your brakes before descending a long downgrade. And for those of you going for a commercial license, you're going to now have to pay attention to these grade signs because they could potentially save your life. Most grade signs, and I say this with the biggest caveat, the biggest warning, the biggest caution, that if they do not have a distance underneath them, most of the time it's going to be 1 kilometer in Canada or 1 mile in the United States is the distance down the hill. If the hill is less than a mile long or less than a kilometer long and it's less than 2 digits, so it's 1 to 9% grade, then just use your brakes going down the hill. If it is more than a mile long, then you need to gear down in order to keep yourself safe going down the road, down the hill, especially in larger vehicles, and especially for those of you with pickup trucks pulling camper trailers here in the summertime, because there's a lot of people with pickup trucks, 1500 Dodge Ram trucks or the Ford F-150s. These trucks are not designed to haul heavy, and they're not designed to haul in the mountains, and they do not have transmission coolers. This is why, for most of you pulling caravans, boats, and those types of things up and down through the mountains, you need a 2500 or a 250. The reason for that is because they have transmission coolers, automatic transmissions, of course, which my personal opinion is that automatic transmissions in pickup trucks or any truck that does any hauling has absolutely no place in that vehicle. They should all be manual transmissions. However, marketing has overruled me. So know that if you're driving a 1500 or 150 and you're in the mountains with pulling a caravan or any other kind of type of trailer, that you potentially could overheat the transmission on the unit. And you see plenty of these vehicles parked on the side of the road in the summertime and they've completely overheated. So know that, and this is how you read grade signs. So at 8% grade, for every kilometer that you go forward, you're going to drop 8 meters. Okay, so for every kilometer going forward, you're going to go down 8 meters. In Imperial, for every 100 feet that you go forward, you're going to drop 8 feet. And once you get into double digits and you get into more than a mile, more than a kilometer, then you need to gear down and use the transmission to assist getting down that hill safely. Cautionary signs. Some of these cautionary signs are useless and redundant. Others will save your life, especially if you have not been on this roadway before. Many of the speed signs on off-ramps on freeways are cautionary signs, and sometimes if you're not familiar with the roadway and getting off the freeway, you will need to get your speed down to that suggested cautionary speed. In addition, on highways, rural highways, two-lane highways where most fatal crashes happen, as is the crash last night, you also need to obey these cautionary speeds if you are not familiar with them. And there are a couple of places on Highway 97C there, railway crossings around Monte Creek and those types of things. There are cautionary signs, and yes, you need to get your speed down because the curves are sharp, because of course we're in the mountains and the roadways are just going in and around the mountains. So they're curvy, they're up and down and around and those types of things. Pay attention to cautionary signs and get down to those speeds. The top sign is a height sign, and for those of you pulling caravans and driving commercial vehicles, 4.15 meters is the maximum height of a vehicle in Canada. In the United States, it's 13 feet 6 inches. And if you're graduating to a larger vehicle, memorize those numbers so that you don't turn your vehicle into a convertible when you're driving. Larger vehicles, destination signs, overhead signs, construction signs. Pay attention to all these signs to be a more predictable driver on the roadway and create driving habits that will keep you safe on the roadway. And as I say, match the flow of traffic. We had a poll on the weekend about does driving the posted speed limit reduce traffic crashes on our roadway? No, it doesn't. That is of my opinion, because if you are driving the posted speed limit and everybody else is driving the traffic flow, there's a speed differential there. And as soon as you get a speed differential in place, it puts you at risk and makes you unpredictable on the roadways. Lane usage signs. These are usually overhead the lane and work in concert with the road markings on the roadway. Be sure to be in the right lane, especially if you're driving a truck and a trailer. If you're going left, you want to be in the outside lane, so you want to be in the right lane. If there's two lanes going to the right, which doesn't happen very often, but every now and again, if you're driving a truck and a trailer or a bigger vehicle, a pickup truck or whatnot, then you want to be in the left lane to go right. And again, these are regulatory signs, and they will be posted over top the lane that you're in. And for example, the sign at the top there, you can only turn left. You cannot proceed straight through at that intersection. Mile marker signs. These are your best defensive tools when driving on highways and interstates, freeways, and motorways. Defensively, If you are getting off the interstate at 375 and you are driving and the numbers are going up and you're at 370, you know that you have 5 miles down the road that you're going to get off in the exit. So you're going to stay close to that right-hand lane. And then once you get to exit 373, you're going to know, okay, I got 2 miles up the road and I'm going to get off the interstate. So you're going to get over into that right lane. So not at the last minute, you're going to be tearing across 3 lanes of traffic to try and exit off the interstate or freeway. These will keep you safe. In addition, if you're doing any family trips, as last week was Independence Day in the United States and Canada Day here in Canada, you can get your kids to figure out how far it is from where you are to where you're going. So for example, if it's 400 and you're at 350 and you say to the kids, oh, it's okay, we got 50 miles to go and we're doing 60 miles an hour, approximately how long is it going to take us to get to the next place? So you can keep people in the vehicle engaged by doing a bit of math. Good luck in your driver's test, and remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. I was coming back on the highway, and there was a major crash a head-on collision on the highway, and they had the highway collision. They had the highway closed. They were investigating the crash, and of course, this is one of the challenges of crashes on highways is when emergency crews come in, that they have to close the road to investigate the collision and figure out what's going on. And of course I got there, and the great thing about British Columbia, because we have this little thing called mountains here, roads running east-west are not great. It's not like in Ontario or the Midwest of the US or out on the eastern seaboard where you can just backtrack a half a mile, get on another road, and then go around and get back. It's where I was sitting on the highway, it's an hour and a half around to get around and come back to where you want to go. So it's like, okay, do I drive an hour and a half all the way back up to Salmon Arm and then come all the way back to Vernon, or do I just sit here and wait? So anyway, I waited, but I ended up waiting over an hour for them to open the road and let the traffic go through again. I mean, and it was midnight and I was already like, oh, I just want to go home. I just want to go home. And, you're sitting on the highway with the big trucks. And of course, when I'm sitting with the big truck, I'm not sure what happens, but every time I'm sitting on the roadway near a big truck, I always end up sitting near a reefer, and a reefer is a temperature controlled trailer, and of course the refrigeration unit is always running. So this is what I get to listen to when I'm sitting on the roadway. It's not nice and quiet, because everybody's got their engines turned off. No, just the big truck with the reefer running. Marion, yeah, unfortunately one of the people in the crash died. Subaru crossed the road, crossed into the other oncoming lane. And a Mercedes hit a Mercedes-Benz, and when I went by, unfortunately, the vehicles were mangled, and unfortunately, that's what front-end crashes do. High-end vehicles, the people in the Mercedes survived, and the person in the Subaru did not survive. So, I mean, there's all kinds of factors in collisions that we can talk about. However, high-end cars have more safety features. Yeah, not good, Marion, but, it's a reality of driving. And the other interesting part about it was that it was at the bottleneck. So going south on 97C, I believe it is, from Kamloops, going south so it's 2 lanes going south and it's 1 lane going north, but the crash happened just past the bottleneck where it goes back to 2 lanes. So it would be interesting to kind of figure out what was going on. And maybe my friend Phil was there because he does crash investigation rather. And maybe he was there and maybe he could fill me in on some of the details of what actually happened in the crash. And then I'll fill you in as well. Yes, use caution, watch out. 85, we just focused on staying hydrated and staying inside. The weather is like day and night here in the States. Yes, weather. And that's the other thing when it's hot, keep yourself hydrated. Use your air conditioning if you have air conditioning in your vehicle. Unfortunately for me, my air conditioning is broken in the buggy, but I just take a liter of cold water with me when I'm driving in the buggy and make sure that I have the fan on. It seems to work all right. However, I do need to buy the hose to get the air conditioning fixed on the buggy because that's going to help you to be more cognizant and paying more attention to driving. And today we're talking about traffic signs, and the rules and culture of roadways is given to you by road signs on the roadway. And years ago when I was taking a Class B license in Ontario, which is a school bus license. Ontario is one of the only places that I know of that has a separate license for school buses. And as a requirement of getting a school bus license in the province of Ontario, you have to take a defensive driving course. And I had been driving truck for 5 years at that juncture. I thought, this isn't going to be any big deal. They probably can't teach me anything more than what I already know. And of course, this crusty old driving instructor walks into the room, doesn't even say hi or introduce himself or give an overview of what we're doing in the defensive driving course, scribbles on the board, and he says, name the 4 signs that warn you of hazards and obstructions on the roadway. And of course, I was stumped like everybody else in the class. We're like, what are you talking about? The 4 signs are the hazard obstruction signs, and Corey will put up the video for you on the hazard obstruction signs, which are there's 3 of them, 3 of the hazard obstruction signs. They're the long rectangular signs with the hash marks on them, and then there's one with a chevron on it, the half triangle, 2 sides of a triangle rather, and so it tells you to pass on the right, tells you to pass on the left, and then pass either right or left, which generally those can be found on traffic islands, and you could pass either right or left of those. And these are the most prolific signs on our roadways. Now that I've pointed them out to you in terms of hazard obstruction signs, you will see these everywhere on the roadways, and they mark fixed objects on the roadway that you potentially could run into. So bridge abutments, concrete traffic islands, left turning lanes, posts, signs, trees, anything that you could potentially run into along the roadway has a hazard obstruction sign. Has a hazard obstruction sign there. So look out for those. The 4th one that the driving instructor was referring to was construction signs, which, as you know, are orange signs with black lettering and symbols thereon, and warn you of temporary work conditions along the roadway. So these are the 4 signs that warn you of hazard obstructions on the roadway. And of course, at that juncture, this was the beginning of my journey of becoming a driving instructor, becoming fascinated with traffic. A few years later, I took another course after I got my bus license. I got my driving instructor's license, and I was in a course with a driving instructor who said that the motor car had killed, injured, and maimed more people in the 20th century than soldiers sent to war. So we're talking about the First World War, Second World War. So the First World War, 20 million people died in the First World War. Second World War is 40 million people. And then, of course, the Korean War in 1950. The wars in the Middle East, the Vietnam War, and I was like, that was the turning point for me where I became completely fascinated with driving and wondered why not more people cared about driving and its impact on society. Because if you take all of the traffic crashes in one country and put them in one place at one time, you would have a national emergency, but it doesn't happen. We don't have that, and traffic safety and road safety, people get involved, and many of the people that are involved are not qualified to be involved, but they're getting in there and they're putting their opinions in there. So there's a lot going on in terms of traffic safety and trying to make our roads safer. Marion, going for my full license on Friday. Congratulations, Marion. Good luck on that. I'm sure that you're going to do absolutely just fine. Shoulder check, shoulder check, shoulder check. As you know, you've been here lots, Marion, and you know it's the most common error on a driver's test. Paul, my friend, why drivers always roll on a stop instead of a complete stop? Paul, it's part and parcel of social driving. It is just easier to come to roll up, have a look, nobody's coming, and then they proceed. And, to try and get people to come to a complete stop at stop sign intersections is going to be a huge challenge that in almost every instance is not going to succeed. A company that I worked for in the States, a trucking company that hauls propane of all things, had me do videos on that because their drivers were not coming to a complete stop at stop sign intersections, and they had a number of near misses with tractor trailers at these types of intersections. And they just could not get people to they could not get their professional drivers to come to a complete stop at stop sign intersections. And it's a safety thing because, as I say to you, shoulder check, shoulder check, shoulder check, ABS. Always be scanning when you're driving. You need to always be scanning, and coming to a complete stop at a stop sign intersections allows you to put in place the backups for your safety. So in other words, look twice, go once, especially at intersections. And the other challenge with this in terms of social driving, as we've talked about before, the average person crashes once every 15 to 17 years. When the average person crashes once every 15 to 17 years, and most people who drive cars are not required to take any upgrading training, they're not required to do any professional development. Therefore, they go along for a number of years thinking and believing and holding the conviction that what they're doing is safe because they haven't been involved in a traffic crash. It's not until years and years later that they do something and it culminates in a crash or a fatality, as it did last night on the roadway, whether the person fell asleep or whatnot. But I mean, it's not likely that they fell asleep because it was 8:30 at night. However, think of it this way. My driveway backs onto an alleyway. 98 times out of 100, I will drive out of my driveway into the back alleyway here, and maybe 2 times out of 100, there will be somebody walking along in that roadway. And it's the same thing when you're driving. Oftentimes, there will be situations that will culminate with circumstances and whatnot where you will get into a crash. But 98 out of 100 times, nothing will happen. And it's only those 2 times that something will happen and a crash will result. And this is why you need to put in place driving habits that will keep you safe when you get tired, you get distracted, you're inebriated, or you just make a mistake. Communicating with other people and putting in place habits that will be your best defensive driving practices on the roadway. Paul, schools are the least observed signs to look out for. Yes, they are the least standardized signs. That's what I was trying to say about school signs. Least standardized. So they are different shapes. I've seen diamond school signs. I've seen pentagon signs that have a blue background with white writing on them. Many of them now, in terms of school signs, are the neon green colors. So know that they are the least standardized of all the signs. And most places, school is not in session right now for the summertime in the Northern Hemisphere. However, school can be in effect all year round in the summertime. So figure that out for the purposes of your driver's test. So be driving in and around the test center where you're going to be taking your test and figure out whether school is in session. Know for the purposes of a driving test, speeding in a school zone is an automatic fail. That is one of the automatic fails on a driver's test. Marion, please do tell the Vancouver drivers they cannot cross all 3 lanes to turn right at the last moment. It's so annoying. Marion, I am certain that I could tell people that they need to be in the appropriate lane for the turn that they're going to make when they get near the intersection, but that I suspect for many people, especially a lot of Vancouverites, that would fall on deaf ears. There's every now and again, there's just these people that are like, oh my God, there's my turn, there's my exit, and they just like careen across 3 lanes of traffic to get there because, of course, social driving. Me first, you're in my way, and I'm going to get to where I'm going as quickly as possible. Brian, some Americans are confused by deer crossing signs. They argue those signs should not be on interstates, highways, believing deers understand, obey these signs. Brian, yes, and I have heard those commentaries where people call in and say that the deer are going to cross where the sign is located, which is interesting to hear those arguments, but it is like a school in area sign. It's deer in area sign, moose in area sign, whatever it might be. And the reason they put up the signs is due to the fact that they've had a high number of incidents in and around that area, not just at that one location where the sign is. And saying, where the sign is, same with passing a driver's test and the location of the stop sign. The location of the stop sign itself is not where you stop at a stop sign intersection. Behind the stop line, behind the crosswalk or sidewalk, if those 2 conditions don't exist, then at the edge of the road just before entering the box of the intersection. There are 3 different potential places that you could stop at a stop sign intersections depending on the configuration of the intersection. And it was interesting in London, Ontario, where we used to test, that they had tricked the drivers and they had a sidewalk and they had a stop sign, and the stop sign was in front of the sidewalk. And it was kind of a weird little thing because it was still inside the DMV area. It wasn't out on the roadway. And inevitably, the first few times, or the first time ever, before I explained it to students, I had explained to them previously what the 3 stopping positions were at stop sign intersections: before the stop line, before the sidewalk, or the crosswalk. And then if those 2 conditions didn't exist, then at the edge of the roadway before entering the box of the intersection. I would explain all this to them. And of course, we would go in on the weekend to the test center, and we would come out at the test center, and there'd be the sidewalk, and then there'd be the stop sign at the intersection, and they would inevitably go right up and stop at the location of the stop sign. And of course, I would say to them, well, you just got a whole bunch of demerits on your test because you didn't stop at the correct stopping position. And they would be like, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, the stop sign, the sidewalk's back there. You got to stop before the sidewalk in order to stop at the right place at the intersection. Traffic signs, that's what we're talking about today. These will convey to you the information that you need to follow and obey to be successful on passing your driver's test. And this is, again, why I tell you to go and practice in and around the test center where you're going to be taking your test. You will understand the signs and be able to figure out the information about these signs and figure out where speed bumps are, where weird, odd intersections are. You'll be able to figure out where churches are. You'll be able to figure out where schools and school zones are. Merge lanes, because new drivers have problems with bottlenecks, and when the lanes go from 2 lanes into 1 lane and you have to merge over, and you can be preemptive about that. In other words, you can do it a couple of blocks back instead of waiting until you get to the bottleneck. Corey will put up the videos with Ariel where, she bailed on a on a bottleneck and didn't merge, and then the next time she did it, she knew the bottleneck was coming, she knew the merge sign was coming, and got over early and was successful in being able to do that. But with this practicing in and around the test center, you can figure out where all these signs are, and you can be successful on passing your driver's test first time, which is going to keep you safe, make you more predictable on the roadways, and keep you out of danger. And more important, passing your driver's test and being successful first time.